Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
Florette carefully select their salad leaves to ensure a perfectly balanced mix. As sponsors of Series 8 of the podcast, Florette have something to suit everyone's taste, from mild to strong salad leaves in bags that can be recycled at supermarkets. So whatever deliciousness you are cooking, pair it up with the perfect salad and make it unflorettable. So we are in the most beautiful setting in the Norfolk countryside in a lovely place called Holt at natural surroundings with Anne and Simon. And we are here to talk about wildflowers, and we are sitting in the middle of a wildflower meadow, and it's beautiful, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I completely squealed when we walked in. It's just gorgeous. And from here I can see all sorts of willow herb, philopendula, the meadow sweet, water mint, nettles. I'm not getting those too muddled up, by the way. Yeah. Fatal. But yeah, it's just really, really gorgeous. We're going to learn lots about wildflowers for lots of different areas of the garden, because a lot of people think wildflower, they think meadow. But actually, you can have wildflowers in damp, shady corners, dry shade, all sorts of areas. So we're going to learn as much as we can from the guys here today. Yeah,
welcome to the podcast. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello there.
And hello.
We're getting Anne on. Anne's sitting at the end of the bench, and she says that she doesn't say so much, but we're going to make her. No, not really. We won't do that. Anyway.
So tell us, how did it all begin, Anne? Now you're in.
Oh, well, I suppose it was my fault, and that was about 30 years ago, unbelievably, when I was looking for a site to grow wildflowers, and through a friend of a friend, this lovely piece of land in the Glaven Valley came up, and I said that would be perfect, and that's how it started. But of course, a long time ago there wasn't the interest in wildflower gardening or wildlife as there is now, and although we tried our best, it actually struggled at that time, and I left to having to earn some money, and came back again about 8 years later with Simon, and I think we've transformed it.
I think it definitely looks like you've transformed it. It looks amazing.
I mean, we're very lucky because it's such a beautiful setting, and people think of Norfolk as being flat, but it's certainly not very flat here, and we're able to make use of an amazing contrasting conditions, because we're sitting at the moment in the bottom of the valley, quite close to the River Glaven, and the meadow here, despite the fact that we've had virtually no rain for 2 or 3 months this summer, is very green and very lush, and that's because there's groundwater here. It's not river water, it's groundwater that's coming off these hills through the ground and irrigating it, and it looks brilliant. But you just have to go a few feet up the slope off to the west here, and it's parched, absolutely parched. So we've got lovely dry conditions up the slope, we've got wet conditions here, we've got all sorts of trees that enable us to attract just a multitude of creatures, which is what we're all about, really.
Absolutely. And of course, for some of our listeners, like Ellen and I, we often we think, oh, everybody understands what biodiversity is, etc., etc. But can you give us that in a nutshell? Why is biodiversity so important? And obviously that is what you do here as well.
Well, biodiversity is just simply the diversity of life. So it's the sort of sum total of all the different creatures, all the plants, the animals, the fungi, and the other different groups of obscure life that we don't really see but are very important. So that's what biodiversity is. And essentially, the greater the biodiversity in most circumstances, if you like, the stabler the system, you know, the more balanced everything becomes, and the more intricately it's all linked together again. It forms a stabler, more resilient system. And it's just great to look at, and, you know, a brilliant place to be if you're somewhere with lots of biodiversity, lots of plants and animals, butterflies and bees.
There was a recent study done by the RHS which showed that if you garden 2 to 3 times a week, your well-being score is higher than anyone who doesn't garden at all. But the more biodiverse your garden is, the greater your well-being score again. You know, so you two must be very happy.
Well, we're very happy, but we're also very busy because we've got about 8 acres here to look after. So that certainly means that we garden a little bit more than 2 or 3 times a week. But it really is great to be out in a mixture of vegetation, mixture of plants. And personally, I think that essentially that's because that's the situation that we evolved in. We evolved to be part of the environment. We were part of the environment. And we had to understand and know all about our surroundings to survive. So I think it's just an essential part of being human to actually be out in the wide world and noticing what's going on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, absolutely.
And obviously here you're attracting a lot of different types of wildlife. Can you run us through that? Because when I edged past a big group going to the toilet earlier, they were looking at moths. And you said you've got about 600 moths here alone. So give us a little kind of, in a nutshell, the different type of wildlife you're attracting.
Well, moths is a good example because there are quite a lot of species of moth occurring in Britain, big and small, and many of them are specialists. They have different food plants as caterpillars. They're not so specialist generally as adults, but the caterpillars, the larvae, feed on a whole range of different plants. So really, the bigger the diversity of plants that you have in your garden or out in the wider environment, the more moths you get. And actually, you underestimated, if you like, the total, because our little moth club, very informal group of people who come here once a week and identify the moths that we trap and let them go afterwards. They've, over about 10 years, identified 800 species of moth here. Wow. So a really astonishing total, and it makes natural surroundings one of the best sites in Norfolk for moths.
That's amazing, isn't it? And we're sitting here amongst all of these beautiful wildflowers. We're in the wet meadows area, aren't we? And like you said, up above, we've got that kind of parched, dry area as well. But wildflowers can grow in kind of lots of different conditions, can't they? And I think for those at home, it would be really nice for them to get some tips on how they could get started. You know, I know everyone's garden might be a little bit different, but do you have any tips for kind of how they could get started growing their own wildflowers?
Well, obviously, you can just grow wildflowers that you like. So choose something that you really like. So, for example, if you like purple loosestrife, which is all in our meadow, grows in wet meadows, also will grow in a good border if you've got good soil. So that's an easy one. It grows easily from seed, or you can buy small plants, put it in your garden, grows very easily. Woodland plants, another one that's very easy. If you've got shade, why not choose all wildflowers for your woodland area, because we have lovely woodland plants in this country. Lots of interesting ones as well that you might not know. We sell quite a lot here, and people are always encouraged to try something new in a shady area. So that's always a good one. If you've got hot, sunny conditions, you know, go to the coast, have a look and see what grows on the seashores, on the sandy cliffs. Those sort of plants will grow happily in your garden. Again, you can buy small plants or buy packets of seeds to grow your own. And any habitat you go to and visit, you can think, oh, can I do this in my garden? Can I make a bog garden, dig a hole, line it with plastic, put a few holes in it, and that'll just hold enough moisture so that you can grow some of the lovely plants here in the wet meadow.
I like the fact that I love the fact how you said about taking inspiration from different areas, because I think it's
great.
very easy to just go, oh, here's you often see the same sort of wildflower mixes. Do you know what I mean? That you can buy and sow, and they're beautiful. But it's nice to be able to go somewhere, get inspiration from it. So like you said, having somewhere kind of dry and sunny, and then perhaps going along like the coastline and seeing what's growing there. So it doesn't have to just be about a standard wildflower mix.
Nice point. Yeah.
You know, go and see what's actually growing in your area or in the wild and take inspiration from that, which is a really nice way of doing it.
It also gives you a lovely memory of somewhere you've been. Because you can do it now. The plants are available to buy and the seeds are available to buy.
Yeah.
So you can give it a go and create your own little Yorkshire town or Norfolk coastal path in your garden.
Yeah, I love that. That's really nice. You've got the memory then of where you've been. I've got to just say, you were talking about the purple loosestrife, which is beautiful. It's full of bees and butterflies. Like, I can see butterflies all over it over there and just bees everywhere. Why wouldn't you want that in your garden?
I know. Well, I have to say, when I first walked in, I misidentified this as willow herb, and I now see there's some willow herb over there because I assumed that this loosestrife, Liferum, wasn't a UK native. This is an English wildflower?
Yep.
Because that actually leads on to my next question, was, do all wildflowers that we grow have to be English natives? And if so, why is that important? And is there sometimes space for maybe, 1 or 2% that are not native? What are the kind of rules, or kind of what do you feel is the right way to approach non-natives?
Well, I don't think there should be any rules because
I like that.
Yes, we love you.
Gardening is about enjoyment and pleasure. It's not about trying to follow a sort of a code of conduct or rules or what have you, isn't it? So, in general, I think the RHS did some research, and in general, native wildflowers will support the greatest range of wildlife, by which they particularly mean insects, I think, rather than anything else. But they also showed that what they called near natives were almost as good. And near natives is a huge group because it's essentially plants from the temperate northern hemisphere. So that's from Europe, that's from China, Japan, from North America. So you've got a huge choice of things that you could put in your garden. And the least wildlife friendly, if you like, were plants from the southern hemisphere, from South America, New Zealand, or South Africa. But try telling that to the bees that go all over our hebe in the garden there. That's from New Zealand. They absolutely love it. So, our approach is very much gardening is about having a lovely place to enjoy, and it's your choice really what you put in it. If you do want to be wildlife friendly, you can just err towards native and near native plants, but if you like something, plant it. Simple as that. I don't think there's some magic formula.
Attitude. Yeah, I really do, because wildflowers, like with a lot of things, like you find even with veganism, Ellen, it's like there's so much judgment that flies around, and we have that with wildflowers. Or you have to have English wildflowers, or you're doing a disservice. But it's so nice to hear what you've just said. But of course, there are some that could be invasive, so there are some you've got to keep a lookout for. Is that fair to say?
There are a few invasive plants that it's actually illegal to sell nowadays, and they particularly amongst aquatics, because aquatic plants, things that grow in the water, are often spread completely innocently but by people, because they give their friends plants for their pond, or they have some goldfish that they feel that they've got to release into the local village pond or something like that. So non-native aquatic plants are a threat to British wildlife.
It's something like the skunk cabbage. I think that was banned, wasn't it?
Not skunk cabbage, I'm not sure it's banned, but it also depends where you are, because skunk cabbage likes rather damp conditions, so it doesn't do terribly well in Norfolk. Only in a few places will it do really well. The same as gunnera. One of the gunneras is banned from sale. In Norfolk, it's unlikely to be anything more than a real local problem, but in west of Ireland, it's a big issue. So it's a bit, the context is important. But one of the worst, if you like, non-native invasive plants is actually buddleia. Because if you've ever been on a train anywhere, you'll see buddleia all over brownfield sites and growing on buildings, and it does invade wildlife rich sites. But there are probably several 100 million buddleia plants in the wider countryside already. So it might make you feel good saying, I'm not going to plant a buddleia in my garden, even though the butterflies are going to love it. But I don't suppose it actually makes very much of a difference.
I have a huge buddleia in mine, and I love
Your neighbour loves it.
I love sitting there and watching all of the butterflies on it. There's so many red admirals on it, kind of this time of year. It's just absolutely beautiful. So I love my buddleia.
So what we're saying, buddleia are not necessarily good because they're non-native and they don't attract the wider range, or because there's too many of them. What is the
buddleia is not. In the sort of in the round, it's not a good plant for British wildlife because it tends to invade and dominate some specific habitats like chalk quarries and things like that can have rare wildflowers in. But in a garden, it's great. We've got buddleias; they're covered in butterflies.
So it is about context, like you said.
We love it. And although you wouldn't want to be introducing buddleias into the wild, there are already so many hundreds of millions of them probably in the wild that your buddleia in the garden is unlikely to really have a significant impact.
I'm going to tell my neighbours that.
Just enjoy it.
I do. Thank you so much for allowing me that.
Hello, I'm Lorraine and one of the founding members of Cayley Brothers. We're mushroom growers traditionally, and we wanted to share with you our thoughts on foraging and mushroom spotting. As the summer draws to a close and we begin to enter the mushroom season, you've probably started to see mushrooms popping up in fields, woods and grassy verges around you. When it comes to foraged ingredients, mushrooms often spring to mind, but more as a danger area and get quite bad press. But did you know edible varieties such as ceps, chanterelles and penny buns thrive in woodland areas within this country? Despite this, here in the UK, there tends to be a bit of a foraging disconnect that you don't have in wider Europe, where there's a stronger tradition for picking fungi. However, we sense things are slowly changing over here, and there are lots of great online sites for fungi identification and apps you can now download. We highly recommend going out and looking for mushrooms, not necessarily with the intention of picking to eat. We're not experts in wild mushrooms, but we would suggest going out with a good identification book at the very least. Or if you're keen to learn more, then having a local foraging guide with you is an afternoon very well spent. They'll help you guide and teach you about mushroom identification. For us, we go mushroom spotting as a way of getting out and into nature, looking beyond the trees and dead leaves and becoming more aware of the details within our surroundings. Once you start seeing mushrooms within the undergrowth, on fallen trees and even up amongst the damp branches, it feels like your mushroom senses have been switched on, and suddenly it seems they're everywhere. Mushroom spotting is really simple and hugely rewarding, and through caution and education we hope more people start to get out and familiarising themselves with some of the more common species around us.
And we're sitting here now, obviously it's summertime, and there's so much in flower. Is there a wildflower that will bloom every season or month of the year? Can that happen, or is it mainly just spring and summer?
Well, you could try daisies. The ones in your lawn will probably bloom almost all through the year.
True.
Good idea, yeah.
And what other
some of those
species?
other little lawn-loving plants, they do, don't they? Little clovers and
Oh yeah, of course, little clovers
and things like that. They can keep going, especially if it's a mild winter.
And what do you think of dandelions?
I love them.
Yay!
Dandelions are great. There's this big flush of dandelions flowering in April and May in the spring, and they're a really important resource for bumblebees and other early emerging insects. And they're a great colour and a big splash of joy in the spring. So what's not to love, really?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, just at that point, before we hop on to the next question, it's also important to leave wildflowers in place because they can be habitats as well later in the season as well. So how do we, if we have got, say, a wildflower area in our garden, how do we manage that and make sure that we don't, cut it down too soon? Because that surely isn't good as well.
Here we sort of work on variety so that we leave some areas and we cut some areas. We deadhead some plants and some plants we leave for seeds for the birds. It's a little bit about knowing what flowers you have and trying to understand them.
Yeah.
If you know you've got teasels, don't cut those
Which
seed
are also
heads off
decorative.
because you'll get the goldfinches and blue tits. And there's a little fungus that lives in the in the bits of the teasels. But if you do need to cut it down, for example, if you are creating a wildflower meadow and the idea is that you cut it every year, apart from leaving some one year and cutting it the next, use your cuttings as a sort of habitat heap. So have a dedicated place for you in your garden to put all those, all the tops, and then they'll be used by other insects and other invertebrates all through the winter.
I really want to jump in here because I've got quite an urban garden. It's probably the size of this deck area that we're sitting on here. It's really small and it's quite modern, but it was completely filled with plants. And I was talking to Ellen in the car today and I was like, I've got so much wildlife. I found a hedgehog nest 2 weeks ago. There was frogs ribbiting last night. The birds are coming in for the mealworms that I'm putting out as well. It's amazing. And I think that's because I had that ground cover. And also, I've never been that tidy. And that is where you're talking about piles of leaves, twigs. That is exactly where this hedgehog nest is. So it really does pay to have those little wilder areas because I can vouch for the fact it really pays off, even in a seemingly very urban space as well. Yeah.
So presumably you've got gaps under your fences. Because that's a big problem, I think, in these new estates. I've seen some dreadful fencing going on, and there's just no room for things
for them to go.
To pass from one garden to another. So that's really something to bear in mind.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Definitely.
It is. It's a lovely garden.
Yeah.
I'd love to know about some of the perhaps more tricky areas in a garden. So if someone has kind of like a shady spot or a damp spot, what specifically might they be able to grow in a shady spot?
Well, again, woodland plants. Certainly in North Norfolk, where our woods are very dry, it's dry shade. I often say to people, look in the woods, see what's flowering. Obviously, in the summer, there's not much flowering, but we do have one or two ferns here that look lovely in the autumn.
Yeah.
And I think you can do wonders with dead tree stumps and logs.
True.
And there's such a lot of interest to be had with fungi coming up from September onwards.
Yeah, that's true.
Right through till January. But you can add things like, not a wildflower, but a cyclamen or something that you might want. But from January, you can get some snowdrops. There's some nice little wildflowers as well that would sort of pop up early. And you can get your good ground cover, so you've got a lot of life going on there. It doesn't have to be bare soil.
Yeah, that's nice. It doesn't have to actually be all about the flowers, does it? It can be about texture and foliage and wood and just creating space for insects to come and enjoy it, I guess. It doesn't just have to be about the flowers.
Yeah, and I think putting some water there as well, even if it's just a dustbin lid with some water in, always will definitely attract something.
Yeah,
which will then bring some birds in.
Yeah, lovely.
That's great.
That's so nice.
So kind of if people at home, Simon, if kind of sitting there, they've got a blank border in the garden, maybe they're even on a new build, and they've got this new, what can they do to attract wildlife? Perhaps they want to make a wildflower meadow. What do you do? Just kind of relax and let the weeds grow? Or would you sow seeds? When would you do that? Kind of, how would someone on a new build attract wildlife?
I think you'd want to start off doing a bit of garden design, really, however big or small your plot is, because a diversity of structure is really good. So having some shrubs and some trees, small trees maybe if you've got the space. But I know lots of gardens nowadays don't really have the space for trees, but certainly they have the space for shrubs. So you putting in some structure, maybe thinking about having a pond and where the best position for that's going to be. I mean, that would really be the best start to think, as if you were designing any sort of garden.
Okay. And
then you can start filling in between with perennials and deciding if maybe you want to have a a meadow, which is actually perennial plants as well, with lots of grasses normally, and maybe areas that you're planting with annuals, maybe pots, as Anne was talking about, if you might have areas with logs or habitat piles or compost bins or what have you. One of the things that we really try and get over here in our gardens is the idea that you've got to look after your wildlife 24/7 all year. So the lovely butterflies that you're enjoying in the summer, they actually spend most of the year as an egg or a larva or a chrysalis, and they have to have somewhere to live during that period. They don't just suddenly sort of appear out of thin air and then disappear again. So things like rotting logs or bundles of sticks and prunings that you can tie together and put in a corner, maybe somewhere a bit discreet and out of sight, are all going to be part of the mix that is going to help to make a garden full of wildlife.
Yeah, I love that. And what about a small space? If you've just got a balcony or a patio, can you sow wildflowers into a container, or is there something you can do to create a space for wildlife then?
Yes, of course. And we've got examples here. We've got a half barrel with a meadow in it, and we've also got a little, very small, like an old wine box, which is planted up with. They're not all native plants in it, but little things to make it look like a meadow, make it feel like a meadow. There's small scabious, there's little steeper grasses, and little bits of verbena and things. So you can have fun with that.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, I think the small spaces can be really creative and fun, and partly I find maybe even more rewarding, because when you've got a small space and then you see wildlife come, it's like, wow, like you feel about your garden.
I know, it's amazing. But even I've seen so much great inspiration online, and you probably know Kate Bradbury, who does various stuff for the BBC. She just had a book come out. She did for Gunners World magazine, I think it was, a hanging basket with plants that were great for a range of different wildlife. So any space you've got is possible to do something. So it's amazing, and the times have really changed as well. And one final question I really want to ask is, you guys have obviously known the benefits of biodiversity, wildflowers, for many, many years, but you must have seen a real change in people's attitudes in the last, say, 2-3 years. And how do you feel about that, and how can we maintain that as well?
Well, I think people are much more interested now. More people are much more interested, obviously, than 30 years ago, when it was a struggle. So you can talk to all sorts of people from all walks of life now about wildlife in their garden. But we also find, and whether this is just because there's more people to talk to, is that more people don't know very much.
Okay, sure.
They're willing to learn, but they don't know. There's lots of information out there. They get a bit confused, and so we do try and put them on the right path.
Right.
One of the big problems is like the wildflower meadow. People think poppies are wildflower meadows. We get that every day. Someone comes and says they want to create a wildflower meadow. They say, well, what is it you're looking for? And they say, oh, that poppy thing that goes on. They really don't know.
I think that's easy to think that, because when you see like seeds of wildflower mixes, it's almost always the poppies on them, isn't it? So I guess anyone who's new to gardening would think that is a wildflower meadow, but there's so much more, isn't there?
There's so much more, and those are cornfield annuals, and they do create a really lovely patch of colour in your garden. They will attract lots of insects, and you really love it, and there's a space for that. And we have a patch of cornfield annuals here, and I do really like the other mixes that you can buy with lots more variety in them, which lasts a bit longer, and those are great. But don't think that's a meadow, and don't think you're going to attract breeding butterflies and those sorts of things into it. If you want a meadow, you either do sow it from seed with grasses and wildflowers, or, like I say, in your garden you can dabble with plants that you like, which is what I quite like to do. and have a little bit of a mix and match of
I
things.
love that.
Yeah.
A bit of mix and match. I think that's really good, and I really love how you lean towards native species, but also just enjoy your garden. There's no harm in adding some of the bits that you like as well. It's like your approach is as natural as all of the planting here, and the name Natural Surroundings. It's like you literally are it. I love it. And it's beautiful just sitting here. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Today. I just realised Michael's shirt matches the purple loosestrife as well.
And I'm near native.
We can lose you in here.
I would like to.
I do try frequently. Simon and Anne, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you spending time with us, and I really hope that our listeners enjoy this. I'm absolutely sure that they will, and it will inspire them to come and check you out, of course, as well, and plant some wildflowers. Where can listeners find you? Are you online, your website, that kind of thing?
Yes, we have a website, and we're also on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, Natural Surroundings. You'll find them as soon as you look up. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me back. It's Emma Britton, Decorative Glass Designer. I'm here to talk about enjoying plants in art and design. This year I designed a new glassware collection called Exotic Floral, inspired by nature and launched at the Chelsea Flower Show back in May. My collection features plants that have strong geometric forms and repetitive shaped petals to them, including red hot pokers and dahlias. I've also added the canna lily flower for structure, and I think all the plants that I've chosen are exotic in shape and presence, hence the name Exotic Floral. I really like the petal shapes of the digitalis firebird, so I chose to include this on my wine glass and highball designs. When I'm creating my glassware patterns, I'm looking at how the plants sit in nature for inspiration. Are they drooping over and facing each other, or standing up tall and poking out of the border, shouting, "Look at me!" Just like the digitalis firebird. If you haven't seen this type of foxglove, I really recommend it. It's beautiful. For design inspiration, I look at how gardeners plant their borders, and then I take the bits that I like best and draw the flowers as if they're in conversation with each other, which is a nice synergy to how people use my glassware on their patio tables, having conversations and celebratory drinks with their friends and family.
Such a brilliant episode with Natural Surroundings, learning about all of their wildflowers, also chatting to them about the attitudes to wildflowers as well. There's definitely a lot that can be done, but we really picked up a few great tips there today as well.
We really did. I loved visiting there, and I can't wait to go back again. And in the meantime, did you know that our Series 8 sponsors, Floret, actually undertook some research into people's relationship with their gardens and wildflowering as well. So I think now is a good time to chat about that, don't you?
Definitely. I love this sort of research. It really gives you that great insight into how people think up and down the UK as well. So actually 2/3 of the people that they spoke to didn't know their weeds from their wisteria. There was 2,000 adults they actually spoke to in this research, and they actually also found it hard to identify common wildflowers and thought the buttercups and poppies were actually weeds.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Because if you know plants, you would perhaps know they weren't weeds, but if you weren't so into gardening, you wouldn't necessarily know that.
No.
But did you know that 60% of us want to plant wildflowers to help biodiversity? So even though it's hard to identify common wildflowers for some, you know, people like the look of wildflowers. They are seen as very affordable as well. So 60%, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, and we're actually come up to the perfect time to sow, but 88% of people didn't realise this. So I think there's a lot that can be done to get across to the public that autumn is the perfect time for sowing, and Floret are going to help with that as well. And we'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment.
Absolutely. And just before we do, 61% in the survey did find a positive impact on their mental health. So I think let's get sowing.
Well, yeah, Floret are actually giving away 1 million seeds as part of their commitment to wildflowering their land and also encouraging consumers to do the same.
So if you want to find out more, go to floretsalad.co.uk/wildflowering to find out how you can get involved.
Absolutely.
like one of those intros.
Oh, no, I'm not singing. No.
You know, like
I didn't know you were recording. You're so
like
cruel.
a little jingle when you start something. That was literally what you just did.
No, I didn't want to sing in public, please. I avoided all sorts of karaoke for years and years and years, even in Japan. And now I just got caught singing on the podcast.
Oh, hang on. You don't do karaoke?
No,
I'm
of course not.
so disappointed in
Jesus, I barely dance, Ellen.
Well, I know that.
Incredibly two-dimensional.
But I did think you'd get up on a karaoke. Anyway, we have just had fun doing a photo shoot, which is what you were singing about in the
I'm
first
still in
place.
some of the clothes. Yeah.
You've kept your top on. It's really
it's quite
nice.
nice, actually.
We decided to go retro, didn't we, for this? Well, we've done a few different ones, like glam and house plants and all of that jazz, but we went a bit retro.
All that we did. I hope no one from ASOS is listening, because we did borrow a few clothes from them. But no, it was time to update a few of our portfolio photos. So we did, and it was a lot of fun. We rented this really cool office space, actually. And, honour upon honour, we did a photo shoot in knot cuts.
We
And
did.
Ella Mary was in heels.
I wore probably my highest heels that I own to Knot Cuts Garden Centre because, like, why not? Is what I thought. Why not?
I have to be honest, you look very nice.
Thank you. I thought you looked very nice too. I especially liked the crop top that you wore.
Well, you know what it's like. You just do an order on ASOS. You go, I'm going to experiment a bit.
Because you can.
I mean, do you think the crop top suited me?
I feel like.
Oh, this is a test.
I feel like.
Test of
Forgive me.
friendship.
I feel like I should say, like, yeah, it looked really good, but I am unable to do that. Like, I literally could not do
Why
that.
do people do that? This is a real. I think this is a real English thing. Like, oh, I love your scarf.
I'm afraid I just wouldn't appreciate you wearing that in public with me.
Oh dear. When we took the photo, you asked if I was breathing in. Was that a good thing or not?
Yeah, because I thought you had a slim belly.
Oh dear, Ellen Mary.
Anyway, it was good fun, and we've got loads of good promo photographs,
Yes,
courtesy
defo.
of Caroline Horn Photography, and thanks to Knot Cuts for having us there as
So
well.
how's your week been? I've had quite a grown-up week, I have to tell you.
And have you been adulting?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've been at the HTA event. I was being a grown-up there.
Yeah.
That was last. I know.
Yeah, we talked about
I talked about that already. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. Oh no, this week hasn't been grown up then. In that case.
Oh, we've moved on
Talking about
already.
last week.
When you're really busy, it does all just blend
I know.
into one, doesn't it? Really. So.
What have I done that's grown up this week? I don't know. Just trying to arrange a lot of the kind of book promo, a few cool ideas around that, just a few different PR projects. What the devil did I do yesterday?
Can I just say, I obviously overheard you just doing an interview
yeah.
with Mike Palmer
that was
for his
grown up.
podcast and talking about your book. So what date does your book come out?
6th of October.
And just in
Quite
case
soon,
the
isn't it?
listeners haven't heard, what is it called?
It's called Hortus Curious,
Uh-huh.
and it's bright pink, and that's all you need to know. And you will love it even if you don't like plants.
Yes.
I think that's the kind of aim of it. So
That's very
yeah.
cool.
So that feels pretty cool. Oh no, yesterday was just, you know, when you have these days, Ellen, and you're like every half an hour is something. It's either a Zoom call or doing this, or maybe even going to a gym class or going there, and it was really like that. And when you get to the end of it, you're kind of exhausted, but you also feel like you really achieved stuff. You
Yes,
know?
you've been productive. And you can tick things off the to-do list.
I know.
We were talking about how we're both very, we like a to-do list. We work best with a to-do list.
But sometimes I rewrite a to-do list and I feel
I do
like
that.
I've done it. Mm-hmm. But I haven't, because all I've done is rewritten it.
Well, I'll let you into something I haven't ever told anyone
Yeah.
before. Sometimes I spend more time writing the to-do list than I do doing what's on the to-do list.
I'm sure many
just
people
some
do.
days it's kind of like, but I really like a neat to-do list.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't like
true.
it if there's scribbles, or if someone spilt their tea on it, I'd be really miffed at
But
that.
I end up having a to-do list that's then got a sub-to-do list as well.
Yeah, that's what all these little books are
Yeah.
around here, but yeah.
But I'm really good at kind of knowing when to do stuff. I think I kind of pride myself on that a little bit. Like, I know if I don't need to do this until Monday, then I won't. So then I don't kind of get too kind of like, all this stuff.
On
you know?
another note, tell us how your garden is right now. Front and
all
back.
right. It's kind of bounced back, I have to say.
That's
yeah. So my fennel is a bloody monster.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Well, fennel's nice, but once it goes to seed, kind of all the leaves go to shit, don't they? You know what I mean? But no, it looks all right. I mean, the calanchoes are saving everything. My lace wisteria is reshot, which is cool. My cherry laurel, I don't know. It's just horrible. But I was saying to you when we were in the garden centre, I really think I was trying to go more perennials than I think the garden can cope with, especially because I'm not always there as well. So I think I'm going to plant some things that, like, at first it's kind of like, oh my God, are you just going to walk into a DIY store? But Hebes.
Yeah.
I think Hebes are actually quite glorious.
That one in Notcuts today is beautiful.
Definitely. 3 in 1.
Yeah, it was just beautiful.
So I think I'm actually going to plant like some Hebe, maybe some Pittosporum, but I think a Hebe is a great kind of in-between plant because it's a good evergreen shrub mostly, but it's also good for the bees as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you suddenly have Pittosporum, you're kind of unlikely to get flowers on them and kind of, so I think, I'm just going to have wall-to-wall Hebe.
Why not? Go for it. Talking of the Hebe, there's a Hebe at the Bishop's House Garden in Norwich that's been grown from a sprig of Hebe from Queen Victoria's bouquet. Isn't that cool? And it's huge as well. It's really, really big. In the front of my garden, I have learned after a few years now, it's not, I'm renting, so it's not mine, so it is on the down low. I don't really do too much, but I have learnt from what I planted out there that it is too hot, it is too sunny, and it's too dry. And I'm not here. I'm not here half of the year. It's impossible. So late when I came back at the end of the heat wave, I pulled a load out as an experiment, and I planted just as succulents like sedums, that kind of thing, Delosperma, like with little lovely flowers on. They have done amazing. So I actually think spring now, next year, because I'm going away soon, I'm going to just have a dry garden out there.
I'm only worried they're too small though, or like it's cute because you can see them from the window.
It's just cute because you can see from the window, and I'm not here all year, you know. And actually, I had a huge buddleia. I know we've discussed this on here before. The neighbours aren't keen on the buddleia. I cut it right back. I mean, all the flowers had died off anyway. I haven't dug it out yet.
It'll be back.
It will be back by next spring, but I'm gonna dig it out. But what I noticed is when I pulled it away, how much light came through the window, and I really like that.
Definitely.
So I'm gonna go with just the low-growing alpines and succulents.
Well, I loved what I did in the front garden with the kind of grasses, Verbena bonariensis, and I feel like the light still gets through. But then I guess that's just a denser buddleia. But I guess once it's not.
But also, it might just be the angle of where it came.
Yeah,
but for me,
maybe.
I'm flat on. Do you know what I mean? There and it.
I'm flat on.
I'm flat on. And it made a really, really big difference removing it. So actually, the neighbours have won this argument. Buddleia is going.
But so I'm going to do a bit of a brainstorm and replant in the autumn, and see how I can evolve the garden a little bit to be very much like a textural garden, but still with a lot of blooms as well. But kind of, but I guess gardens just constantly evolve, don't
all
they?
of the time.
And it's funny because we always look at them as kind of like a finished piece, but of course a plant is forever evolving and changing anyway. So
then a garden never stays the same, even if you have your garden for a lot of years and you know it inside out, you know the soil and you know the aspect and all of those kind of things. Every year it will change.
Totally.
You know, you cannot account for, I don't know, pests and diseases or different like climatic conditions, and it does change all of the time. And I think that's part of the fun of it.
I know.
You know, I'm really looking forward to doing what I'm going to do out there. And actually, that was all came from a result of box tree caterpillar eating the box. That's how it all started, and I had to remove all the box.
Because you just got to move with it, really.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do, really? What you got coming up? When's your next podcast out?
My podcast guest did not show up to the Zoom meeting yesterday.
What the heck?
Yeah.
No.
I know. But I'm sure there's a reason for it, so I'm going easy on that.
Have you spoken since?
No, she has not replied to my email. So then I'm worried that there's something wrong. But anyway,
things can happen.
I'm recording a new episode tomorrow morning, and so I feel like maybe if I have enough time, I'll put it out tomorrow night. If not, it will probably be next week because, I don't like to clash with the plant-based podcast.
You're in a different chart anyway.
Self-improvement, completely different. But so maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday night, maybe
that's
Monday.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you said you're like having to share a little bit more.
So like, I think it's got to the point where I feel like I am able to share more of my story in order to help other people. Like, I think up to this point, my story was my story, and I would sit and think about it or deal with it in order to help me. But I'm kind of over that now. Like, do you know what I mean? I feel like it's all gone and been done, and I think my story can help other people. So in each episode, I'm giving a little bit more of myself, and that's quite hard.
It is when you're like, I think we're naturally quite, I think private's always a very strong word, but kind of just like, we don't need to share everything kind of thing. Like Melanie C, she's very similar. No, I say this because I went to her book, I don't know, like a book launch kind of chat she did on stage at the Barbican last Friday. And it's funny because you can see she's quite introverted. That's the word I needed.
Right.
And it's hard to give bits of yourself away when you are naturally introvert. And it's very easy when someone's loud, you think, oh, they're extrovert. But kind of,
that's not necessarily the case,
and see they're not. So, it's hard because then a lot of people in the public eye would be really extrovert and they're kind of sharing everything and this and that. And it's when you're an introvert, it's really hard to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. And also when it's very tough topics that are very personal to you.
Yeah.
Like I genuinely, obviously the podcast is about well-being, for anyone who doesn't know, like linked to plants mainly. And I have never outwardly said my dad was an alcoholic.
Really?
Yeah, and I literally said it, and then
cathartic for yourself as well.
Well, yes and no, because I think I've gone through the process already. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm done with it. So I think that's what I mean. I've got to the point where I don't feel like it's cathartic for me. I hope that it's just helping somebody else. But really, it was the first time I've ever just put that out there. Do you know what I mean? In all of these years. So yeah. Anyway, people, plants, well-being, if you're listening.
Don't be afraid to plug
That's
it,
a podcast.
No, that's really cool.
So yeah, and then it was all about like how I used to enjoy going down the end of the garden. That's how it's all like linked into gardening.
I think it's, when you are like an introvert, it's like sharing things for the right reasons at the right time.
Absolutely.
In order to assist yourself sometimes when it is cathartic, but also to help others as well.
That's right. There you go. Very good, isn't it?
That's a bit of adulting.
No, we just adulted. That's a bit crazy.
Oh my lord.
Just to finish this gossip, can we talk about something that's not adult at all? Just for fun.
I'll talk about a project I've got coming up with the Joy of Plants, which is like, it's a dating night with plants. So you get to date your favourite plant.
I'm not entirely sure.
You get to take them home as well.
Is this
not just
like,
for one night stand.
Is this legal?
No, it's kind of going to be set up like an evening on first dates, and it's first few days of October. I'll post about the dates over the weekend, but it's a really cool promo because people buy a ticket, they get a drink, like a cocktail. They then do a survey to kind of like choose their favourite plant for a series of very scientific questions.
Really?
That then gives you a result like, oh, you really suit a sporty plant or an athletic plant or a, go-getter or something.
What's an athletic plant?
Like a cactus or something, because they're kind of really strong, resilient, la 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 la. So it's a really carefully crafted project, and I'll be posting about this over the weekend.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love I just did this interview with Mike Palmer, and he's like, they always ask like, what are your plans and this? I'm just like instinctive, just stuff comes along and I just do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
I
about
love
plants.
that. Yeah.
It's like, that's just
and
what you love.
I think it then attracts more of that because you're seen as someone who just throw yourself into different stuff,
Yeah.
Just don't say no, There's no need to say no usually.
Be a yes person.
Yeah, totally. So that's kind of just what I'm doing really. Yeah.
Sounds good.
In all my ASOS gear.
That you're not going to send back with the label still on at all.
You know what it's like when you end up just keeping everything and somehow convincing yourself you like it, because
and then you never wear it again.
Too far to go to the post office. Oh God, I don't know. It's fruitless, fruitful, fruity, fruit loopy.
Whatever it is. You've used a few words today, and then afterwards you've gone, is that what it means?
Yeah,
Did I use that in the right context?
It's hard. The one I always struggle with is colloquial.
Colloquial.
What does it mean? Just
does
kind
that
of like
mean
common?
like just, you say just local, like as in just?
No, colloquial. It's with a Q.
Does that make a difference?
Well, yeah, because it's not like local, but it's
small.
I think it means kind of like when something is kind of like when you would just use the slang word for something, kind of like very informal, colloquial. Is that right? Oh, maybe don't even.
I don't think that is the meaning.
We need to go off. And
Can you just Google that?
Yeah, colloquial.
Quickly, because I feel like everyone needs to know. You might be completely right, but I don't really hear that many people say it, to be honest.
Colloquial.
Nice bit of internet thesaurus.
Used in ordinary or familiar conversation, not formal or literary. So colloquial, everyday language.
Everyday language.
Yeah, that's
okay.
it. So yeah, and I think we are terribly colloquial, which is not a bad thing.
We're going to leave it on that then.
See ya.
Bye.
Floret are a farmer-owned cooperative passionate about what they produce and sponsor of the plant-based podcast. Grown by a network of local farmers who work to bring you the tastiest salads of the highest quality. So how will you make your dish unfloretable? The music for the Plant-Based Podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.